Welcome to Beyond the Megawatt. I'm Valerie Crafton, Risk and Site Strategist. I'm joined by my co-host, Mara Irvin, reuse expert and real estate visionary. Together, we are the Data Center Darlings. We're spotlighting the voices and ideas powering digital infrastructure's future. Let's dive in and go beyond the megawatt. Hi, welcome Beyond the Megawatt. I'm so excited to have our special guests today, Tracy and Lisa. Thank you both for taking the time to join us today and share a little bit about yourselves and your story and just talk about the future of labor and what that's going to look like and how we've got to evolve around that. Tracy, let's just start with you. Tell us your journey. I mean, what drew you into the world of strategy and scale and what keeps you in these high stake environments?
Sure. Interestingly enough, right out of high school, I spent about a few months in community college, and then I went into the Air Force and I was in electronic intelligence. So essentially cryptography, worked with the F-117A stealth fighter, served my time, my one term, and wound up in IT because I just loved it. So I started out playing with Windows 3.1, aging myself there, and DOS and taking computers apart and putting them back together, and really loved that industry and wanted to know more about it. So I stayed in IT. I did network administration, installing computers, doing software and hardware training, functional training, and all of that was leading into project management and facilitating trainings for other organizations, et cetera. So all of that had a IT baseline with while I was learning how to manage projects as I was putting these trainings together. And that was the foundation of my career in IT infrastructure and project management. I came into data center through IT cybersecurity, which came out of the Air Force, and then program management experience. And I was brought in to lead IT projects that evolved into BMS and EPMS retrofits, client fit outs, M&A integration, and other strategic initiatives. So initially, my data center background was primarily setting up warm and hot sites or transitioning sites over the wire in IT. But when I came into the actual data center industry, I realized just how much more was involved with power and space and cooling, connectivity, site selection, utility, vendor partnerships, design and construction. And I was totally thrown in headfirst into that vast, deep ocean of the business. So for me, it was a sink or swim situation, and I loved it. So my background was tech for well over 20 years and program management, but with my ongoing research and, I guess, addiction to learning and education, and wanting to know more about what at the time was future technologies like AI and machine learning, I realized just how ubiquitous data centers are, and the absolute need for the industry and for critical infrastructure to thrive. And along the way, I met a ton of really great people. And despite the excitement of the business, it's really been the people that have kept me going. I really like seeing how all of the pieces strategically fit together, markets and pricing, land, collaborating with utilities and customers. I really enjoy that. But you enter the human factor in, and I'm all in. So on top of that, it's been a great experience meeting women in this industry, because I immediately found that there were not as many as I thought that there may be, but meeting different women in various parts of infrastructure, whether it was operations or construction. And I've been a mentor to many young ladies in tech along the way. So it warmed my heart and made me really happy and even more excited to help and support women that are in this sector.
There are so few women in the industry that when we find each other, I feel like we're just all kindled spirits and we're just immediately just like magnets to each other. I felt that way about Mara as well. When we met and connected, it was really just virtually. And I know all the women I've met in this industry, I'm just like, oh, you think like me, you get it, you get excited about the same things I get excited about, and it's just fun to talk outside of girl talk. It's just fun to talk tech and data centers and mission critical, and it's just really cool. Now you come from the military and you just kinda shook off that, "Eh, no big deal, big high pressure world, really fast pace. I loved it, let's go," kind of attitude, and I'm wondering how much of that military training really prepared you for that? Would you say that that was a big foundation for you?
I would say that it was part of a big foundation, even more so, I think my parents were the bigger foundation. My mom grew up in the country, on the countryside here in Arizona, and at 5 years old, she was working on farms and picking cotton and potatoes and grapes, and she had grit. She was born with it and an amazing work ethic. She retired from Motorola slash General Dynamics. So she's had a heck of a career. But on top of that, my father grew up in the inner city, and both of them from very working class, blue collar families. And uh, mom taught him, while he taught her street smarts, she taught him survival skills. And somehow they came together and they taught my siblings and I, like, how to go camping, how to survive out in the forest, and how to be smart, around other people, and street smarts, and grit, perseverance, and resilience. And I think that more than anything, that was really my foundation, work ethic, etc. And so when my father was in the Air Force too, and I initially thought, oh, I'm going to go into the Navy with my girlfriend, and we were going to hit the buddy program. But we had this little trailer, and my dad said, okay, I want you to pull down the top bunk and go sleep up there for the next couple of weeks and tell me how you feel. And I thought, yeah, I'm not going to do that because I'm just ever so claustrophobic. And he says, well, probably Navy is not for you. Okay, Marines. And he didn't like that idea. That was not it. And he goes, here's what you're going to do. You're going to get into the Air Force if you're going to get into the military. And that was what he was familiar with. So I said, okay, let's do it. And so I think that that foundation that they gave me only helped tremendously with the discipline and the grit and resilience that is required and learned and sharpened through military training.
Not everyone gets to have that, and so what a blessing to have
Yeah.
such a strong foundation and someone to really say, "Hey, we're gonna teach you not only how important and guide you in your path forward, but how important it is to really understand the other parts of survival in life," and I just love that story. So why don't we that's a good segue into Lisa. So, you all have met each other along the way, and Lisa's the head of HR, and Tracy, you're the chief of staff at your business. So people, like you said, are really important to the both of you. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you together and talk about from your different perspectives. And of course, being in the mission critical world, what you bring. So let's talk about Lisa a little bit and walk us through your path. What sparked your passion for people and systems? And how have you seen hiring landscape evolve along the way?
Thanks. Well, I grew up in Alaska, so it's everything you think. It is long sunny days and long dark days as well. And I was pretty excited to kind of move on into the world and find somewhere else to start my life. And it ended up really being here in Phoenix. So I've been in Phoenix now for 20 years, and I'm very lucky to live close to some of you here on the call. And so we get to see each other in person, which is such an amazing foundation for us to build these relationships on. Phoenix is where I got started in data center. So it's been 14 years in data center this year. So in 2011, I was in banking and it wasn't going amazing at all. And so was out looking for a new opportunity, and I was recruited into IO data centers. It was a fairly new private data center company headquartered in Phoenix. And so I joined as the 95th employee as an executive assistant to part of the C suite. About a year later, I was in HR as a generalist. And I think that's part of the fun of data center, right? There's so much growth here that people are able to find opportunities to change their career path. After a period of time of being exposed to various functions in a corporate environment, my passion for people and inclusion, which comes from some of my upbringing, like really helped me decide that HR is where I think I'll be able to leverage my skills and make a difference for people, which has always been really important. And it was amazing to have an organization and an HR leader who brought me in and helped really train me up. So I'm very organic, homegrown talent. The IO experience was really interesting. It was owner, operator, developer, and manufacturer of a modular data solution, kind of like a Connex in the data center. And we were getting ready to go public. So it was a time of huge growth and expansion. Like when you think about the tech stories of just putting people anywhere you can find in a building, like folding tables in what became a data hall later on, just really, really squeezing people in, and then until you get a wider foundation to really take care of people. So fun to build that business, fun to really develop all of the parts of HR and the foundational bits to be able to like support the excellence of the top talent that we were bringing in. And a couple of years in, IO did not go public and was acquired by Iron Mountain Data Centers. And so I made that transition from private into public as an HR business partner. Still a multinational role, still supporting, M&A, greenfield expansion, just a lot of small data centers coming together to really turn into something harmonized. And I did a lot of that harmonization work with Tracy over our time. I think it was a really great investment in the teams. It's really the people, right? We work for the people that we work with and making a difference, being able to see career paths develop, supporting people, whether it's with resources or just emotional support, so that they're becoming the leaders of the future, which we really need. And I stayed at Iron Mountain until last year when I started looking for a new opportunity. So there's kind of limited career path options, and I was ready for the next step. So I was looking, and CleanArc Data Centers was looking, and we found each other. So I've been here just over a year. I joined as a much earlier employee, so it kind of rounds out that data center lifecycle experience for me from an HR perspective. And it's so fun to bring all of the things that I've learned and the differences that I've want to make to an organization that has the leadership that believes in that and building a company that we want to work with each other and really go the distance together. And you can't do that without that kind of support. So it's really been a dream opportunity. And we've doubled in size since I've joined. And I couldn't be more excited every day to meet so many great people and try and develop opportunities within this organization for them.
That is amazing. What a great story and what a great path. And I'm so glad that you stumbled into this world from the finance world. And so I think that's a good segue into just kind of talking about how you're trying to actually build something and different is what I heard you say. You're trying to create the thing that you wished was already there. And I love that you all get to have that clean slate to kind of build upon. So what are some of those outdated mindsets and practices that you're trying to evolve or change and when it comes to hiring for mission critical?
One of the things that I think about, it's not recruiting specific, but it's really about the administrative processes that we expect of our people managers. Right. We've seen teams working to run lean. I don't think we always take into account how much time a manager can spend really developing an effective team and managing them while also operating a data center. Right. I read recently that you should estimate 10% of your capacity for each of your direct hires. We think about how many direct reports managers will have, and is that leaving them any opportunity to do right by people and giving them support for everyone to be successful and grow, to create that talent pipeline that we need to have to move forward into more senior levels. It's a heavy administrative burden these days to be a people manager. So everything we can do to make that simpler and enjoyable, effective for people, that's what we think a lot about.
I think I have personally have witnessed this firsthand where you've got to bring in these additional resources, right? And we need help and you're already seeing the very small lean groups really struggle and they're getting you can see it on their faces and their attitudes and the way they show up or don't show up, I should say. And they're getting burnt out, right? And so which one costs more? Creating a balance and hiring just a few more resources or having that turnover. And I don't think we think about it in that manner. So you'll have a lot of leaders say, "Oh, well, I need more resources." Well, why do you need more resources? And then is it for the right reasons? And if it is for the right reasons, well, we want to maintain lean, so we don't want to approve those additional resources. But then we lose the people to burnout. I'm just wondering if you're seeing that, or if maybe in your time in your careers, if you've watched something similar happen.
No, I've definitely seen that, and especially without a real investment in providing a career path and a path for development for our individual contributors who are talented, high performing, and we want to stay lean. So we put them in a position of leadership to manage other people, but we don't teach them how to get there. Right. And so they'll lean on their ability to be an individual contributor and what their skill set and knowledge is, and the management piece that goes along with it not only burns them out, but it burns out their team. And I think that if we continue along that path where we identify what are the competencies or skill sets and characteristics, personal characteristics of a high performing individual that may be in another industry, whether it's military, if it's technology, or something else, maybe it's medical education, but they exude those characteristics, they embody them. How do we take that and teach them the industry? And I think that establishing some type of a development program pipeline. I know infrastructure masons, they have outreach into military and teach them about the industry and give them a pipeline for or connections for getting into it as well, so that we can build upon those skill sets and teach them how it applies in data center.
I'm interested to get your perspective on this, Dr. Trey. The feedback that I've received, and I have a family all come from military. My brother is a 100% disabled vet himself, and the feedback that I've received that when they've come into our industry, they went from a military place where they were surrounded by the same mission. Everybody were flowing the same direction. You knew the person, all everybody had your back, right? And then they end up in an industry where it's quite the opposite. It seems like people are pushing against each other. We're not all working in the same direction. You can't necessarily ensure that the person on your team is going to have your back or a different agenda. And that was some of the feedback that I get from the military. It's a very different environment that they've got to adjust to when they get over to this side. And it's kind of too bad because it sounds like, could you imagine what we could accomplish if we were all working toward the same goal, if we all leaned in to the change that we want to drive, if we all leaned in and said, let's figure out how to make this happen rather than pushing against the person trying to drive smarter, faster, improved, sustainable, different way of thinking or doing something different than we've always done it. I think there's something magical we can learn from the military that they're seeing firsthand as being pulled out of one type of environment and getting plugged into another that we can actually build upon. I'm just curious if that's something you've witnessed being from the military yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it where it's a real challenge coming out of the military and transitioning into private public sectors that are just different, and you don't feel that sense of teamwork, or we're all on the same mission, or they've got my back, leave no person behind type of thing. However, I think like Lisa and I have both experienced this where we've conducted high performing workshops, and there are certainly activities that can take place where we demonstrate, we teach, we have them experience small exercises that show them the importance of what teamwork is, how it's applied, how it should be in your mind, how that affects how you're thinking and what you say, and how that will show up in your actions and your behavior. And I think that that's something we could certainly build upon. But you see it in the military, you see it in Formula One racing. As a matter of fact, there were in healthcare teams of healthcare in the surgery room in ER, where they were taking the concept of Formula One, where you've got one team that comes in and they take the bolts off the tire, they pull the tire, and they're coming back and forth. They take the concept and apply it to the ER so that it's more efficient. People understand it's a life and death situation. How do we become more efficient? We can take those concepts from other industries and apply them. The same thing happens with the military, taking those small pieces of education that are drilled into to them as active members and they keep with them as veterans. How do we take those small activities and create trainings or other events and activities that they could apply to others that were not in the military, so that they reinforce that idea, build teams that can perform on a high level.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. What I've noticed though is, they're just natural leaders, and you in the military they're trained in a way that if the person in front of them falls, they take charge. They step in and then they take the lead and so on and so forth. And so they're all just naturally trained to be leaders, ready to have your back, ready to step in, ready to jump in and be thrown to the deep end and just figure it out. And I just think it's just such a beautiful formula, and maybe we embrace them and they help create sort of that training, that camaraderie that they've learned, and bring it into, and as we hire them, let them lead those conversations, let them lead by example, and let them teach it to folks who haven't had those opportunities, and to have that ingrained in them, and those work ethics built in. I'm
Absolutely.
wondering.
We actually do that in at Stream, where we have focus for vets at SDC, and so we have an onboarding process for vets, and they have a buddy program, and we try and do exactly that for our vets who understand those concepts, and those that are not vets coming in, they can have a buddy and start developing these
It, it
concepts
has
and these skills.
It has to be an organizational imperative, right? Like you can have a natural leader, but they're not going to be successful in an organization that doesn't value being purpose driven and providing the investment of the support that it takes to build that muscle memory of being a high performance team. So you'll have people that are well intentioned and want to succeed, and maybe they have some organic talent. But if the organization doesn't value and invest in that, then it's going to be extremely demotivating for those folks. And you either end up with someone that should leave or that does leave.
Oh, that's so true, and that's unfortunate if they do, because you've invested so much and they bring so much value. For you to not be able to hold on to that talent, is you've got to stop and ask yourself, "Okay, what are we doing wrong and how do we get this right?" Because we can't let that type of mission critical mindsets walk out the door, right? Yeah. So, let's move on to degrees versus credentials, and I guess grit over resume. It might be a good conversation around that. Are degrees and or credentials still the best signal of readiness to enter in our industry?
I think it depends to some degree on the role, right? There are going to be roles where formal and specific education and knowledge in order to be effective at the job and safe, right? Certain design standards that is necessary, but we need to be extremely creative whenever possible. So when we're designing internal job descriptions, one of the questions we ask is how critical is an education? How flexible can we be here? In a lot of situations, we're looking for transferable skills. So you're already thinking creatively of who can I bring into this data center role, since we know that we're not fully staffed. About half a data center talent is going to retire in the next 10 years, and we already need to double the talent that we have. So if we're not creative, we're going to be understaffed greatly. So I think that we need to look similar to what Tracy said. You need to be interviewing for competencies as well as skills, right? So a lot of times the right mindset can be the right person, even if they are doing something for the first time.
I think that partnerships with vendors or suppliers is going to be really important moving forward. Additionally, as Lisa mentioned earlier, there are just a number of people that are going to be retiring really soon. So how can we capture those insider insights in some way, shape, or form and apply them to either a knowledge base or be able to tap that knowledge base for training? I think that's going to be important as well. But some of those resources would include vendor partnerships, so that we can train specifically to a piece of equipment, but also conceptually to a piece of equipment. So we're as brand agnostic as possible, but we're building on the skill sets that our operators are going to need to keep our businesses reliable and up.
I love that. And then what about you, Lisa? Do you have any creative things that you all are doing for training and upskilling?
We're thinking about what we're going to need. So I think for us, it's an exciting time because we're in the planning phase of what is that going to look like when we start hiring large volumes of individuals and how do we onboard effectively.
One of the things that I've noticed throughout my career is when it comes to onboarding, and I think it's probably one of the biggest gaps we have right now is we have such a small amount of the SMEs left. And they're already stretched thin. They're getting pulled in all of the different directions, right? And they can't be the one that everybody in the company who's new calls. And yes, it's great to hire transferable skills. And yes, it's great to be able to train them in house, but that puts a lot of pressure on the folks who have to do the upskilling. So what do you have to, it's really more of a question. What are you putting into place to ensure that you're creating sort of this continuous improvement platform that enables you to get all of that good knowledge out of someone's head into a place that you can easily search and find it so that we're not only are we not having to put so much burden on the SME, but we're making it very easy for us to share lessons learned and find those lessons learned very easily. So whether it's the project in front of you and learning from a project that's behind them and it's in the phase behind them instantaneously, trying to create those sort of handshakes between the technology and the people and the projects at each project, because so often those lessons learned die on a desktop or die in a playbook or die with the project, and we're not actually passing them on. We're not collecting them. We're not tracking trends around them, which then should be feeding into your learnings, right? So it's just how do we create that easy platform of technology so we can find it, share it, upskill faster, and understand where the trainings need to come in based on trends that we're tracking.
AI is helping tremendously with this, where we can capture that information digitally and be able to access it as a knowledge base, and reference it later on. If we can create lessons learned that will pop up later on with other projects that will teach us, okay, what are some of the decision making points that we failed to see, or gaps that we encountered before, that'll help us mitigate any of those risks later on with new projects. That goes with, like I was mentioning earlier, capturing some of that insider insight from folks that are more experienced and maybe changing industries or leaving the industry, retiring, etc., and being able to index that digitally so we can use AI for queries and hopefully improve the training. But I think what also is really helpful and needed is for the organization to understand where they have single points of failure, and they'll have to make the investment of allowing that SME to devote some time away from keeping the lights on. So upskilling the talent that's there so that the person can step away and help create a training or an onboarding, or help create a knowledge base even for a short while. But first, being aware that you have a single point of failure with that particular person and the knowledge that they have or the skill that they have, and then taking the time and investment to pull them away to understand what it is that they have. How do we create training around it, and then upskilling the people around them so that you no longer have that single point of failure. You have cross-functional people who can step in if that person wins the lottery or goes on vacation, anything like that. So and AI absolutely 100% is helping with this issue.
One of the mistakes I see folks make around this concept is they'll have a database that they're collecting all of these, and they have thousands and thousands of lessons learned. And what AI is really great at is sifting through all of that information and summarizing it for you, right? The humans are not great at going through and summarizing as fast as an AI can do it. But where the mistake comes in and a false sense of security can impact you is if your data that you're collecting isn't done in an organized, consistent way, meaning everybody is inputting it exactly the same way, what happened? What should have happened? What was the feedback? Everyone's answering the same questions and giving the fact. Everything's got a category. It's regionalized. It's has a, it's mechanical, it's utility, it's fiber. It's categorized. Was it a design phase? Was it construction phase? Was it early site selection phase? When did this happen? Being able to really be consistent on how you collect all of that information to understand when it happened and making sure it's consistent will then allow you to spit out the correct data. So AI is only as good as what you feed the machine. And if you're feeding the machine just a pile of data, then the AI is going to spit out a false sense of security. And I have seen a dozen dashboards get presented to executive teams where what I saw on that dashboard wasn't what was actually happening in the field because the data that it was getting fed was not in an organized, clean way. And so that's the part that people a lot of times will drop and mess up. It's one thing to have AI tell you what's in there, but then again, it could spit out the wrong focus points.
Yeah, I think that you absolutely make a great point, and I agree. And for existing organizations who would find it challenging to say, okay, let's step away, let's create the strategy, let's input all of this information and currently or correctly, sometimes we have to add another human factor to that. So while, for example, we're trying to fix the plane while it's in flight, okay, we have all this information that isn't properly categorized. Let's create a process from this point forward. We're going to use this form or this format. We're going to keep it standardized. That way you have future proofing of the new information. However, in the meantime, let's put human eyes on this other information that the AI is categorizing, classifying, etc., and ensure that we've got eyes on it. They can verify, yes, this information is correct. That way you have two uh, approaches for handling accuracy
So
and
that's the number
quality.
2, yeah, absolutely, number 2 mistake that I see folks made is they think they're just going to have this AI system and they're not gonna need a human anymore, but you still need someone who's used to creating those reports, and similar to when I saw a dashboard and I knew immediately that that was not what was happening, and I had to point it out, "Hey, that we're not in the green, we are so in the red, that is not the correct reporting." You have someone who can immediately tell you that something's off here, and they can find and go through the data that it got, sift through it and find where it was off, take that out and then rerun the report and see if it gives you something a little bit more accurate. But it is an extension. AI should be an extension to the human, and it's the combination of the two that makes it the most powerful. And MIT actually did a study on it, and they were able to prove that AI alone was not as smart as the AI human combination. All right, well, I think it's time that we move on to the audacious question, and so as we wrap up here, we always like to end our segment with a little something that everybody wants to ask, but nobody actually is. Let's call out the elephant in the room today. If you could scrap and rebuild the entire talent strategy for this industry from scratch, no legacy constraints, what's the first thing you'd throw out, and what would you create in its place?
Gosh, hard to pick one, but I will. So the one that comes in first, top of mind, is performance management, right? Like this is a really administrative process. Like it comes from a good place of trying to be able to show how decisions are made and working towards a fair process. But so often it feels incredibly inauthentic and not productive, right? Are people growing from the performance review process? Do they feel that they've been fairly compensated based on the output of this process? And has anyone enjoyed doing the process ever? Maybe based on my experience, no. So there is going to be a way. Everyone in HR is hoping that they're the one that find the way to lighten the burden and actually bring more value. And I think we're getting closer to seeing, especially with AI, some processes that will actually add value and leave people feeling like they've been invested in and really seen after they invest their own time to engage in these processes.
If I could do it all over again, I would make it so that professional development was no longer an option, but rather mandatory. I've worked in quite a few organizations that didn't make the investment in developing their people. and didn't put it in the budget, or if they did, it wasn't much, and it was the first thing that got cut towards the end of the year, middle of the year, when we saw that, hey, we need to show a little more revenue or do some cost cuttings, and the people pay for it. And ultimately, our organization pays for it, our revenue pays for it, our costs pay for it, etc. So I would definitely make it so that professional development was not an option.
I love that because frankly, your resources, your people are your number one asset. And if you're investing in them in the long run and they're giving back to you to help build something amazing, you want to make sure they're around all the way to the end and that you're showing them that they're just as important as the time that they put in, like both of you have said. So thank you both for being with us today. This has been a great conversation. We probably could go on and talk about this for another hour. I think I had 10 other questions we never even got to. And but thank you all so much, and we really appreciate you.